Hello and welcome all you mad scientists and awkward teenage boys. Rating system. This video is my review on the second season of Rick and Morty. I only specify that since it's basically become a tradition and I'm stuck in an endless void of explaining the already explained. Anyway, to the review. A Rickle In Time has Rick, Summer and Morty continuing where we left off with time being stopped. They unfreeze time, causing time to become unstable. Meanwhile, Jerry and Beth deal with the situation that is Jerry hitting a deer with his car. The Rick side from this episode is absolutely what I want to see from Rick and Morty. The plot seems to be the priority, but the jokes are shoved in as frequently as they can without seeming unnatural. Usually Rick and Morty take an existing sci-fi trope and just ramp it up to 11. This time, they kind of develop their own sci-fi concept. The characters being so unsure seems to keep causing their time to split.
We're exactly like a man capable of sustaining a platonic friendship with an attractive female co-worker. We're entirely hypothetical.
Which, if that still isn't made at least a little understandable, they try to use Schrodinger's cat as a way to simplify it. These split timelines can interact too. Despite me not really caring about Morty, I care about Rick. And that sacrifice was the first moment where I genuinely felt sad watching this show. I know people will bring up other moments, but unless I care about the characters, then what they do or what happens to them won't make me sad. Like I mentioned, there's a decent amount of humour shoved in here. While Rick is facing a potentially dire situation with the timelines, he gets out a whiteboard to prove mathematically why Summer and Morty are equally terrible. Now that's the kind of humour I like. Also, the time alien is freaking brilliant. The voice, the personality, the design, and the gun, all brilliant. Also, he has one of my favourite lines from the series when talking about time prison because of his delivery.
You know what they do to third-dimensional life forms in time prison? Same thing they do in every other prison, only forever.
Rick getting slightly out of sync in time and then thinking the other Rick is trying to kill him is brilliant. It's just a good example of showing that he's not always in control of every situation. This is easily one of my favourite plots from all of Rick and Morty. There's a ton of other stuff I could mention, but it's got a creative concept and a good amount of humour. I love it. However, there is a thorn in this episode for me, and that's the Jerry and Beth side. It isn't bad. Jerry being worried about cops because when he hit the deer he was eating rum raisin ice cream is classic Jerry. I also like that we got to see a bit more from Beth and just how insecure she truly is about both her marriage and especially her job. It's nice to see since her character hasn't had much up to that point. I like that side of things. So I love Rick's side and like Jerry and Beth's side. I wonder what the rating will be. I wonder what's in between love and like. Overall, I really like this episode. Mortynight Run has Morty saving a fart from an alien assassin and then helping it complete its mission. Meanwhile, Jerry's put in a safe area that some Ricks put some Jerrys in when they go on adventures. There's a lot of good in this episode, but it never feels like anything outstanding to me. Crumbopulous Michael is a major highlight. He's one of my favourite one-off characters. His love for killing is infectious.
Anyone, anywhere. Children, animals, old people, doesn't matter. I just love killing.
The fart alien is decent, but not the best guest character in the world. The twist at the end, if you can even call it that, was not very shocking. The fart's best moment was the David Bowie-like moment, which is to be expected since it's voiced by Jermaine Clement, and that seems to be one of his things. This and Moana being my only examples, but I've heard there's a bunch more.
Say goodbye, Moon Man. Goodbye.
Shut the f*** up about Moon Men!
The song is definitely the highlight of the whole episode. All of that destruction to such a peaceful song is great.
My life is a joke.
Roy the Game is interesting. I like it because it adds to the cynicism of the Rick and Morty world, of how meaningless and little we all are. However, it takes up a lot of time and as soon as you see the stepladder, you know he's gonna die. The Jerry side is brilliant, possibly my favourite Jerry B-plot so far. A person dressed as Beth to make all of the Jerrys feel comfortable. Jerry being able to leave while predictable is funny because it's Jerry and he doesn't realise it. And also I found the Jerrys not figuring out stuff as a group funny. A lot of what this episode does is good, but nothing really stands out to me as spectacular. The closest thing to it being the song. Overall, I like this episode. It is close to being a really like, but I just never feel like coming back to this one that much, so it'd feel a bit wrong to give it that score. Also, Assimilation has Rick meeting up with his ex. Unity, a creature that is a unity of creatures, after he goes to a distress beacon to steal some shit. Most of the episode focuses on Rick and Unity's relationship, her being a good influence on him but not being able to get that through, but it's more Rick being a bad influence on her and destroying everything she had built. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, Unity is just a monster. She infects creatures and takes over their minds, making them her puppets. The Rick, Morty and Summer side, which while sort of separate I'm counting as one, is good but isn't a standout from the series for me. The standout moment for this episode is the ending, which I'll get to. Meanwhile, after Jerry does some messing about in the garage, him and Beth discover an alien locked up in Rick's basement. This plot mostly focuses on, is Rick good or bad? The sides Jerry and Beth take being incredibly obvious. It's a really good Jerry and Beth plot. Actually, one of my favourites from the series. The alien breaking out is pretty damn funny.
Second of all, cards on the table. I'm a murderer that eats babies, and I came to this planet to eat babies.
There's quite a lot of funny moments in this episode, but this episode doesn't really stand out for that, I don't think, for most people. The moments I liked for comedy were Rick's daddy issues, the Community reference, a fantastic show by the way, especially for the first 3 seasons and then season 5.
Okay, now make him cry, but happy cry. Now make them all make fun of the blonde one. Now make them all do it on the table. Can't believe you created a whole show for me. Now cancel it. Okay, now put it back on. Alright, I'm bored.
For more funny moments, there's the alien acknowledging what a terrible being it is with the way it says its crimes. The funniest moment for me though, without a single doubt in my mind, is the fight over the nipple shape. That's my favourite moment in the episode, and that includes the ending.
I'll be damned if that ripple nipple bitch's race is superior. The cone nipple people will rule this world!
You shut your mouth, you dirty knife nipple bastards!
What'd you say to me, you target chest piece of shit?
Ripple nipple bitch will never not be funny for me. The reason I think this episode stands out so much for most people is because of the ending where Rick almost kills himself. Him only being saved by him passing out before the machine could wipe him from every conceivable universe. Look, I get why people care about this moment so much. It shows Rick at his saddest point to date, and tells the audience he's more than just an asshole. Rick is a terrible person though. He just is. And because of that, I can't feel as bad as most people seem to when watching this. Also, we've already seen quite a few redeemable moments from him, and this one isn't close to being my favourite. That being said, it is a good moment. I'm not trying to say it's a bad moment. It isn't bad. And if I were to say it's bad, then I wouldn't be good at saying what I truly think, and that would be bad. To sum up, the moment is good. It's just not my favourite moment from the series like it seems to be for a lot of people. Overall, the Rick side is just about good for me, and is saved by the ending. The rest of it is very straightforward for Rick and Morty, with a few standout moments. The Jerry and Beth side is also good, it just doesn't get a lot of time. Overall, I like this episode. Total Rickall starts with Rick shooting Uncle Steve in the back of the head. Turns out he was just a parasite that takes a form of a different creature and implants its memory into everyone's heads. They multiply, so the rest of the episode is about Rick and the rest of the real family trying to figure out which of the family and friends are real and which are fake. Also, Mr. Poopy Butthole is there. This is one of my favourite episodes from the show. It's somehow stuffed with more creativity than a regular episode of this show. This is kind of a flashback episode, the first of 2 flashback episodes full of memories we haven't seen. Dan Harmon seems to have that as his thing, because the Community episode that does the same thing is one of my favourites. This episode has one of my favourite little attention to detail moments from the series. The little parasites on the rocks from Mortynight Run are the parasites in this episode. I like it a lot because it shows that Rick is smart, but he's definitely not careful. The episode quickly spirals into insanity, spiraling even further the more parasites that show up. My favourite creature is probably Photography Raptor. Everything is ridiculous, but that's my favourite. Sleepy Gary and Jerry's relationship is depressingly funny, something the show continues to nail.
You gotta hide me, Sleepy Gary!
Don't worry, I have a plan. If we can get to my boat, there's a...
No! Just send me to Gary. I want to be with Gary.
The solution to figuring out which ones are really parasites and which aren't is great, and I love that it was Morty and not Rick for once to figure it out. There are some things I don't like. Some of the flashbacks aren't hilarious, but I mostly don't like the 2 different fourth wall breaks. I won't spoil everything here, as if you haven't seen it then I do want you to still be surprised, even though I thought the ending was predictable. This is the episode from the show I've seen the most, and even though it is on the weaker side of this rating, I can say that I love this episode. Get Schwifty has some heads from out of space coming to Earth wanting to see what Earth has got. Rick reveals the creatures are essentially just creating a singing competition, but getting eliminated is death. Ooh. Meanwhile, because of the giant head, people go towards faith as an answer, believing the head is God. I'm willing to admit this episode isn't for me. It just isn't. I think this particular brand of silly jokes just didn't work for me. It's just a lot of it isn't the type of comedy I like. Get Schwifty, the song itself, I'm conflicted on whether it was supposed to mock pop songs, or just be a fun random song Justin Roiland sang in, let's face it, a voice closer to his,
I'm Mr. Bulldog,
and one that didn't even sound like Morty.
Oh yeah! Raise that posterior!
This episode feels like it was made as a way to tell the audience not to take the show so seriously. The fan base wasn't as big when this episode aired as it is now, but that doesn't mean there weren't some overly serious fans beforehand. It just means their numbers were smaller. I know people say this show has a terrible fan base, but I feel like with any show, the fan base will seem bad when it's at a scale that this show is at. The main story is okay, and it works, I guess, for being something really stupid, but it isn't ambitious, which I know is kind of the point. It's not bad, I may be giving you that impression, but it feels very straightforward with what it does. The B-plot I do prefer, but only slightly. I know people might get annoyed about how cynical the show is about religion, but the show's cynical about everything. Religion is just something that offends people pretty easily. That and politics. Oh, I mentioned both. I'm gonna be in trouble in the comments. The B-plot is mostly about worshipping the heads. It's nothing extraordinary, but I do like seeing some little bits from Principal Vagina. So, what about the bits that I thought were funny? I'm great at transitions. I liked Bird Person's entire scene.
You know what this human eats?
Don't be gross, Tammy.
Bird.
Tammy, gross!
And Principal Vagina instantly dropping all over religions, and just how changed the townspeople become so quickly. As for the jokes that I flat out dislike, it's mostly just the iced tea ones. A lot of jokes may not have landed, but those iced tea jokes were just so stupid and terrible. Some of the dumbness behind the episode I liked, but it was a bit rare.
Why didn't he turn into a snake?
Trade secret, Mr. President. Particle beam in a wristwatch, snake holster on the leg.
But for the most part, no. No, not liking, no. The episode's definitely one of the weakest in the series for me, but I only find it to be mediocre and not bad. Rick has a microverse battery to power his ship. The battery stops working though, so he has to find out the issue. They then quickly go into additional microverses inside of other microverses, with characters questioning their reality. Meanwhile, we follow Summer in Rick's ship, with the ship itself being left in charge of keeping Summer safe. This is a fantastic episode. The slavery with extra steps argument is brilliant.
They pay each other, they buy houses, they get married and make children that replace them when they get too old to make power.
That just sounds like slavery with extra steps.
Ooh la la, someone's gonna get laid in college.
No, they work for each other in exchange for money, which they then...
Well, that just sounds like slavery with extra steps.
Eek, Barbadurkle. Somebody's gonna get laid in college.
Well, they won't be slaves. They'll work for each other and pay each other money.
That just sounds like slavery with extra steps.
I love that it's used as a way to show that despite Rick creating Zeep, Zeep is pretty similar to Rick in a lot of ways. You know this is going to be a good episode pretty much as soon as it starts. Rick saying you can't just add a science word to a car word and expect for it to make sense, and then proceeding to do that is great. It's just such a great self-aware moment. When the arguments start about if people live in a miniverse / microverse or teenyverse, it all goes to shit. Then the Sumain guys and Zeep try to survive in the miniverse that's inside of the microverse. The thing that makes this episode truly great is the dynamic between Rick, Zeep, and even Morty. Rick and Zeep both hate each other because they're both so similar, and their personalities being so similar means they pretty much hate everyone, including each other. Morty is important in this because he's the one that calls them out on their bullshit. Rick and Zeep don't really listen, but having someone that sees what the audience sees is needed so the episode doesn't become irritating. I really didn't care about Morty in Season 1. Character-wise, that season was all about Rick for me. Season 2 and onwards really help add layers to characters and just use them better for me. I just don't like Morty's character, even though it's not necessarily a bad one. The ending is brilliant. I won't say much more than that. I'll just say I kind of hope we don't see Zeep again. I like where they left it off. Meanwhile, with Summer we get some truly funny moments. The plot is basic, but when first watching through, it's kind of hard to predict. It has one of, if not my favourite moment from the entire show. The moments with the fake hunter is awesome. Watching a person's life be healed and then completely destroyed shouldn't be funny, but it is, because of how nuts it is. I really love that moment.
Oh my god!
You stay here, Hunter, no! God, no! Hunter!
All of you have loved ones. All can be returned. All can be taken away. Please step away from the vehicle. Keep Summer safe.
I also love that Rick's personality is clearly in the ship in some way. Overall, I really like this episode. I was very close to saying that I love it. This episode, I feel like if people were to rank every Rick and Morty episode, then I'd rank it higher than most. It's a really fun episode. Big Trouble in Little Sanchez has Rick putting his mind into a younger cloned body so he can go to Summer's school to kill a vampire. He then gets carried away with high school shenanigans. Meanwhile, Beth and Jerry go to couples counselling. The counselling involves the couple seeing what their partner thinks of each other by making it into a real creature. First of all, I do find it a little weird Rick even gives a shit enough to put his brain into a younger body instead of just going into the school and slaughtering the vampire. The episode makes it clear he both loves and despises being a teenager though. Tiny Rick is great. Tiny Rick was the big thing people said when the show had a smaller fan base.
Oh, Tiny Rick!
People will probably want me to at least mention Morty's packing up the shit line. It's alright. I never found it funny, but I tend not to find the "it keeps going" jokes funny. Most of that side of the episode is Summer trying to save Rick from his teenage mind, while Morty is being a dumbass and thinks Rick is happy. Rick's dances and songs are good, and his whole personality in a younger body is great. There aren't any truly hilarious moments for me, but there are a lot of subtle things like the vampire's name. The best moment from this side of the story is Rick destroying all of his clone bodies.
I guess it's back to the drawing board. Grandpa's back, baby!
Meanwhile, the couples counselling is probably better than the Tiny Rick stuff. This is my favourite Beth and Jerry story so far, up to this point in this season at least. Their monster versions of each other working together is terrific, same with the real Jerry and Beth. The couples counsellor, voiced by the always wonderful Jim Rash, condemning Jerry and Beth's marriage is tremendous. The best moment from the whole episode though is seeing Goddess Beth coming from the mind of Beth's ideal version of Jerry is just messed up, and gives us a good look into Beth's mind.
Well, I had a feeling that in your mind, the ideal version of me is one smart enough to see you as a goddess.
Not such a stupid worm now, are you?
Honey, when it comes to the subject of your ego, I'm Stephen Hawkinson.
Also, Buff Jerry will always be stupidly funny. Overall, this episode is so much fun. I really like this episode. Interdimensional Cable 2, Tempting Fate, is the sequel to 60 Minutes, an episode that introduced us to Interdimensional Cable. The family goes to an alien hospital to save Jerry from something. Rick, Morty and Summer watch TV in the waiting room. Meanwhile, Jerry has to make a decision over whether he's willing to give his genitals to save an alien. This episode is worse than the original. Why though? It's the Jerry plot. The Jerry plot is one of the weakest in the whole series. I wouldn't call it bad, but I definitely don't think I'd call it good. It's alright. It's fine. It's watchable. The only real alien twist is that he's giving up his genitals to save an alien's heart. Otherwise, it could just be an argument over whether Jerry would give up his dick to save a life. Meanwhile, at the Rick, Morty and Summer stuff, it is an improvement over the original. While it is still a mixed bag in terms of quality, there's only one I flat out dislike. The personal space one. I like or I'm indifferent to all of the others. I think part of this is just due to them feeling faster paced. There's no fake doors here, but unfortunately there is personal space. Rick's reaction to personal space, unlike fake doors, was funny at least. My favourites, you may or may not be asking yourself, certainly not asking it in that way. I like the eye hole advert. I really liked the Michael and Pikel bit, just really stupid fun.
Oh, it's always about you, isn't it? Can you believe this guy, ladies and gentlemen? He's got his own news show, he's got a normal name. Hey, flip back to the news! Oh, yeah. You could tell our parents started with naming with him. It's like, oh, Michael. They had that one planned before they even got pregnant, I bet. And they found out I was attached along for the ride, and they said, ah, shit. Well, just it. Call him Pikel. You, Pikel. You're a piece of shit.
My favourite is either the Michael and Pikel one, or maybe Octopus Man. You can tell Justin Roiland is absolutely hammered at that point in the recording, and that's what makes it so funny.
I'm a troublesome octopus person. Uh-oh, I gotta save some trouble. 'Cause here comes a trouble mite.
Even if he did mean to mix up his words, I still bet he didn't mean to mess them up in that way. Overall, I can't do drum rolls. I like this episode. The Jerry plot does hold it down, even though I did think Jerry getting shot over 50 times was funny. Look Who's Purging Now is an episode I really like. Oh no, I spoiled my rating. Oh no. Everything about the episode just screams really like to me. It's a classic Rick and Morty adventure. They go on a purge planet just as a purge is about to happen, and take part in it since Morty wants to save a girl. This episode is really fun. Rick enjoys watching and taking part in the purge, while the purge also brings out Morty's anger. Meanwhile, if you can even count it as a B-plot, since it's clearly only there to resolve the Rick and Morty plot, Jerry tries to bond with Summer. Nothing really happens. Taddy Mason is great though. There's a lot of stuff I find really funny in this one. I think it's one of the funniest in the series. It makes its ultra-violence funny by how ridiculous and creative it gets with it. In terms of the usual smaller moments that I love the moment of Rick talking to the guy that is doing casual jokes about how cruel he'll be when the purge is on.
So what do you do during the festival? You lock yourself in, or you go out and do some stuff?
Oh, I do some pretty bad stuff.
Oh, I bet you do, old-timer.
My favourite thing from the episode, though, is the lighthouse guy. His insecurities for his screenplay is charming, irritating, and funny all at the same time.
You don't have to mollycoddle me. I want to improve my writing. Tell me your real thoughts.
All right, well, I'm not a huge fan, personally, of the whole 3 weeks earlier teaser thing. I feel like, we should start our stories where they begin, not start them where they get interested.
Get out.
What?
No, I'm sick of this. You bang on my door, you beg me to help you, I share something personal with you, and you take a giant shit on it.
I loved it, and you can say that his death was unjustified, but it was justified enough. I'm glad he's dead. What amazes me most about this episode is how quickly it was written. If I'm not mistaken, this was written since the writers planned for the cliffhanger at the end of this season to be resolved in this same season. It was decided they wanted more time on that, so this episode was written pretty quickly by Dan Harmon for the first and I think second act, and then handed off to Justin Roiland and Ryan Ridley. There is a vibe coming from this episode that it was written quickly, but it's not in a bad way. In a way, it shows that the writers know the characters of Rick and Morty well enough at this point to write around a fairly basic concept quickly, but still make it creative and hilarious. And a lot of the better stories from shows are ones that were written quickly, because a lot of the time it means it just came naturally. Overall, yeah, I really liked this episode. It's just a shame the Jerry and Summer thing felt mostly pointless. If you somehow saw my top 10 Rick and Morty episodes video before I took it down, then you know that this was number 1. I love this episode. It's Rick going to Bird Person's wedding only for everyone to find out Tammy is a secret agent. While I didn't care for Bird Person very much as he wasn't a very developed character, I feel as though he's one of those characters more important dead than alive. His death separates Rick further from his humanity. It's nice seeing Bird Person's wedding just because we get interactions we normally wouldn't. Beth and Bird Person, Beth and Squanchy, and Jerry and Squanchy. It's a shame we haven't seen Squanchy in a while. There's a ton of stuff I love in this episode. The planets they go to are all creative, the ending is devastating and it develops everyone so much more. The Cobb planet is probably my favourite comedic moment from this episode.
Get in the ship, sweetie!
What?
Get in the damn ship! Everything's on a cob! The whole planet's on a cob! Go, go, go!
I know I'll get hate for this, but I don't give a shit. Jerry wasn't in the wrong with what he said at the end of that episode. Sure, Rick cares about them, but he goes out of his way to make them think he doesn't so much, which means I can't blame Jerry for not knowing. Rick does destroy their lives, but at the same time, they all seem to hate each other. So I don't think it's as simple as saying one person is the good one and one is the bad one. Though as far as people go, I'd say Rick and Beth are probably the worst. Jerry definitely isn't bad for thinking what he did though, he's just not a very smart person. The very end with Rick's sacrifice is the most sad moment in the whole series for me, but that moment doesn't exactly continue how I would have liked it to in Season 3. But as far as a cliffhanger goes for this individual episode, it's great. And I'm not going to take away anything from this episode, just because I wasn't fully happy with how they continued it. Those issues are on the next episode. I love this episode. It ends with a brilliant cliffhanger and the whole episode up to that is unbelievably creative and sets up the next episode fairly well, and sets up a lot of the future for this show. This season of Rick and Morty added onto the foundation the first season created greatly. Not only did it give us sequel episodes, the premiere being a continuation of the previous season's final, and there being a second interdimensional cable, but it added a lot to the existing characters, whilst expanding the world, whilst also somehow maintaining comedy and sci-fi concepts. Season 1 slowly built up Rick becoming more and more human and understandable. He got little moments like in Me Seeks and Destroy, and eventually an in-your-face cry in close encounters of the Rick kind. This season steps that into the next gear. He gets an emotional moment for Morty in the premiere, he tries to commit suicide in the third episode, and he gives himself up for the family's safety in the last episode. Along with the further humanization of Rick, this season develops its other main characters. Morty is less screamy in this season, as it's made clear that he's more used to the absurd adventures. The Purge episode, while containing screams, he's pretty confident throughout. Summer is developed more than anyone else. In the first season, it feels like she was written as just a teenage girl, and that was her whole character. That shouldn't be the whole personality of the character. Obviously, you can follow stereotypes, and I think it's fine to follow some, but if you want a solid character, then you either have to write those stereotypes somehow amazingly so it's good again, or develop other aspects of the character. This season made her be a second Morty. While she maybe doesn't understand Rick as often as Morty, though there has been some swap over with that, she's more confident than Morty, and smarter. She isn't unrealistically confident or smart though, which is good. She's meant to be a relatively normal person. Jerry is relatively the same. This season focuses even more on him being a punching bag rather than him being stupid. He's still definitely not smart, he's Jerry, but it steps the punching bag side up more. I do feel like his character needs more than him just being a punching bag though. He needs a more redeemable aspect, other than him just caring about his family. Beth. She is once again a plot device, for the most part. I think a big part of the reason I like Big Trouble in Little Sanchez is that she's very much like Rick. For the most part though, she still feels like a plot device, as she feels like she's used as an excuse for Rick to stay at the house. I don't know if she's meant to come across as unlikable, but I really don't like her as a person. I'll assume she's meant to come across as unlikable, even if it sometimes feels like the writers want you to care for her. Overall, I think this season is an improvement over Season 1. It didn't have a single bad episode in it, and only one mediocre episode. It had my two favourite episodes in the series as of Season 2. Not gonna spoil the Season 3 video. The animation improved as well. That's not very surprising though. I also think this season, for the most part, is funnier than Season 1. Overall, this is a fantastic season of the show, and I highly recommend it. That is all for this video. Bye, I guess.